day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. This is the last one of June. Summer's approaching, and down here in southern Alberta, boy, what a summer. It's been actually quite cold and wet all spring. The experts, it's always the experts. They tell us to listen to the experts, and they said we're going to be in for a hot, dry spring. The drought's going to continue. The world's going to end. Misery, flames, anarchy in general. Well, at my place south of Calgary, I got a jungle going on back there because I can't keep trimming the bush back fast enough with all this rain-sun combination going on. Hey, let's have some good news for a change. Good news, the weather is good right now. Where is it going to be next week? I don't know, but you know what? Where is it going to be in a month? The experts don't know either. Kind of shows some of the stupidity of weather policies. The show's going to be a little bit different today. I don't have a formal guest on, but you're going to get a whole lot more of me with a lot more of my ranting and raving. We'll check in with Dave at least, and he'll give us some news updates and things that are going on out there. And there is a lot going on and a lot to cover. So I'll start on, what's been really, dominating the news across Canada. It was such a nice surprise. I'm not a big hockey fan, so I kind of watched the Oilers thing. I was, peripherally hoping, I guess, to see a Canadian team get that cup just to break the drought there of things. It didn't happen. Went to bed, and, it looked like I was also, of course, watching the by-election results going on out in Toronto. And when I went to bed, the Liberals were holding a slight lead, though it looked like they were taking a pretty good beating for a safe seat. But when I woke up in the morning, lo and behold, the Conservatives won it. Now, the Liberal Party of Canada, they are in dire straits. The loss of Toronto St. Paul's in a by-election, it's more than just a setback for the party. It's a catastrophe. Toronto St. Paul's isn't a bellwether seat that you could look at that might swing either way in the political winds. It was one of the safest Liberal seats in all of Canada. It's been in their possession for more than 30 years, almost 35. So if Liberal MPs weren't already in a panic before with their dropping support numbers, they certainly are now, or they're completely deaf and blind, which is possible with them. If Toronto St. Paul's can fall to the Conservative Party of Canada, any seat can. No Liberal seat is safe. Justin Trudeau, he's stubbornly clinging to the party leadership anyways, though, despite party support obviously collapsing across Canada and has been doing so for over a year now and continuing to decline. He's vacuously continuing to pretend that sunny ways are still going on, and his party's electoral viability is crumbling all around him. We've had scandal after scandal just pummeling the Liberals, and Trudeau just shrugs them off. He's convinced himself he can overcome this dearth in electoral support and turn things around. Now, while demands from citizens for Trudeau's resignation have been going for a long time and they're increasing in volume, the culture of submissiveness within the Liberal caucus has kept any internal critique muted. With every Liberal MP now fearing for their political lives, cracks in the united front of the party support for Trudeau are about to break wide open, I think. Party loyalty, it's going to be tossed to the curb as Liberal MPs try to salvage at least their own jobs. Will that be enough, though? Will Trudeau finally succumb to pressure and resign? It's hard to say. The pressures of Trudeau's position, they've been clearly getting to him. He's always been weird, but he's been increasingly bizarre and acting out at events lately. He doesn't appear mentally stable, and he could be delusional enough that he's convinced himself that he can still pull his party out of this ditch. There's certainly signs he has a messiah complex, and such a disorder can shield a person from reality. Look, the knives are sure to come out, and if Trudeau keeps fighting against the pressures to resign, the Liberals might tear themselves to shreds. And that appeal, that scenario holds some appeal for us, but you got to remember it comes at a cost. Some people are saying it's best that Trudeau remains at the helm because it'll put the Liberals into the electoral doldrums for years, maybe a couple of electoral cycles even. But the problem is the cost of his continued tenure is too high. He's not harmless while he sits in there. So from a partisan perspective, Trudeau, yes, he's Pierre Poilievre's best friend. From a citizen's perspective, though, Trudeau's continued time as prime minister is a disaster. With 1 or 2 more years in power, remember, he could stretch it out to 2026, according to the Constitution. Trudeau could really grind our economy fully into the ground. Affordability, productivity, and the GDP per capita are already in the toilet, but they can still get worse. Under Trudeau's continued guidance, it surely will. Canada's international reputation, we're turning into a laughingstock, and it's going to continue to slide under Trudeau's incompetent leadership. He needs to be removed, and as soon as possible, for the sake of the nation. Look, the Liberals are already crushed enough. They won't be able to recover for an electoral cycle or two anyway. The party's going to need to rebuild, and it's going to take them time. I mean, there'll be no shortage of applicants for Trudeau's job whenever the heck he does resign. But the most qualified for that role are probably going to stay on the sidelines, actually, for a while. The next Liberal leader is going to be a placeholder who's never going to see beyond being an opposition leader. I mean, remember last time the Liberals burned through 3 leaders after Chrétien's departure before they managed to win another election. It was Ignatieff, Dion, and Martin. So not many serious contenders are going to want to finish their political careers as the Kim Campbell of the Liberal Party. The loss of St. Paul's is cause for celebration among common sense Canadians. I mean, we're exhausted by the terrible governance under Trudeau. The chances the Liberals surviving the next general election, no matter who's leading them, are slim to none. If Trudeau steps down, some Liberal seats could be salvaged, though, even if the election's lost. The clock is ticking, though. Even if Trudeau resigns today, it'll likely take until the new year for a new leader to be selected, and that leaves the Liberals with less than a year to try and turn things around before at least the scheduled election date. Until Trudeau steps out of the role of Prime Minister, though, nobody should be breaking out the champagne flutes. He's an unstable and desperate man who's still capable of wreaking havoc on the nation. Trudeau has to go, and the sooner, the better. That's kind of what's got me going today, guys. Like I said, I've seen a lot of online discussion about it. People have been talking about that, saying that, again, we got to keep him in there. We want to have the joy of seeing him crushed in an election. We want to see him, it turn into another Kim Campbell sort of situation. We want to see the Liberals reduced down to 2 seats. And again, I know the partisan in me, the person who can't stand the Trudeau Liberals in me, wants to see that too. But we've got to look at the damage if that dingbat stays at the helm of this country that much longer. As I said, internationally, we are a laughingstock. Our country is not trusted. The Trudeau government is hiding traitors amongst their midst. They're taxing us into oblivion, and they're leading this country into the economic toilet. Is it worth garnering an extra 10, 15, 20 conservative seats when there was going to be a majority anyways? Just keeping Trudeau in just to knock it down by that much is not worth it. The cost is too high. The thing is, the only ones who can pull him out, though, the only ones are his fellow Liberals. So what's it going to take? How bad is it going to have to get? I got to think a lot of them. I mean, I know believe it or not, I will concede, there are some good people in that caucus. There really are. I mean, people, most of them, Liberal, any of them, go into politics with what they feel are the best interests of the country in mind. I know some people don't believe that, but it's true. Often they morph into something else later on. But there are some good Liberals. There are some principled Liberals. They've been biting their tongues for a long time. And if only to save their own butts, they got to speak up. They've got to take that clown out of the leadership of their party for their own sake, for their party's sake, and most of all, for Canada's sake. Are they going to do it? I can only think so. I mean, I don't have a political membership anymore. It allows me to be more critical in all directions with things. And if I was, though, still in a party, I spent a lot of time in parties and everything, and my leader was that off the rails, my leader was sending us that far into the toilet, I would be critical of that leader. I'd be looking to move that leader along. I mean, you have to if you want a future for your movement. But these Liberals just seem to be determined to float on the Titanic until it hits the iceberg. We'll see what happens. Okay, well, let's check in and see what's happening out there in the big bad world with the news and what stories are making the top headlines and drawing the most traffic on the Western Standard Head's website, and speak with our news editor, Dave Naylor. He's in studio today, a treat where I can...
A treat? Technical issues?
Yeah, we got a few technical issues.
Checking. Can you hear me?
I can hear you this way. This, sometimes the old tech of just facing each other and talking actually works.
It's a lost art, because normally everybody's got their head down in the phones and whatnot.
True enough.
So tell me about your weekend exploring the deep and dark, murky world of professional quilting.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that was quite something. Yes. Well, as I mentioned before, Jane's business is in the barn quilt teaching with courses and things such as that. And I got to learn just how huge that it was. The Quilt Canada show in Edmonton.
Wow.
As a diligent husband, I came along to offer support because Jane had to teach a course, and she had a booth set up there, and thousands, literally thousands of quilt people all converged on this show for 3 days in Edmonton.
Oh, who knew?
Yeah, and boy, they spend. I mean, so I don't know much about quilting. I don't barely know a thing about quilting, but I mean, these multi-thousand-dollar sewing machines, things like that. And yes, it was nice and emasculating standing at that booth as the one man among thousands of quilting ladies. It definitely most is a feminine trade, that one.
No kidding. But I understand you may have had a good weekend, but there was one member of your household who wasn't happy.
Oh, Duke.
Yeah, well, I
Oh,
mean, what did you do to poor Duke? Have
well,
you?
we had the dog sitter, you know. It was Justin, Jane's son, came and stayed at the house for a few days, and he played with the dogs. They had a good time. But Duke is as you can see in that picture, yes, a very temperamental soul. And for the first 2 hours when we were home, he got excited when we first got there, but then he went into a pout and he wouldn't make eye contact because he was quite ticked off that we dared to leave him behind for 3 days away from home.
Well, yeah, if I was Duke, I may have bitten you.
He's a sensitive dog.
He is. He is. So you mentioned the big bad world of news, and yeah, I think our top story right now is involving a big bad violent dude. There was this machete attack in Lloydminster, and now police are looking a big manhunt for the machete wielding guy, and he shouldn't be too hard to spot, Corey. He's pretty distinctive. He's got his entire face is tattooed, and earrings and studs coming out anywhere. But
Yeah.
handsome looking dude.
Never would have suspected he'd be a troublesome sort.
No, exactly. I'm sure he's been a contributing member of society for many years. But police warn if you see him, you're not to approach and to call 911 right away. We've got some more fallout from the topic of your rant today, Justin Trudeau and his humiliating defeat in Toronto. This comes from our columnist Paul Forseth, and he'll tell you his thoughts on it. Big news out of Denmark, Corey. Big farting news.
I'm always big on farting.
Big on farting news. Yeah, I figured that. For the first time in history, government has put in a tax on farting and farting for cows. It's going to cost them, I think it's €100 a year for each head of cow. That goes into some sort of methane reduction fund. I mean, who knows? But if you remember, farmers all across Europe were rioting and taking to the streets only a short time ago because of the big plans to remove their farmland and stuff like that. So it's not a good day to be a farmer in Denmark. Got good news out of Shell, though. Shell has decided they are going to go ahead with a multi-billion-dollar carbon capture and storage project outside Edmonton. So that'll be good for jobs and hopefully cleaning our methane and carbon capture out.
Well, it's maybe Denmark could come up with some sort of fart capture project,
Yes.
and intubate their cows and pump those toots underground.
A plastic bag around every cow's end.
Oh,
well, no,
yeah.
you can't
Can't
use
use plastic.
plastics.
No, it
So
had to
would
be hemp
paper-
or
I
something.
don't think paper would work, would it?
I don't know. I'll try it with a bag later.
Hey, Canada Day weekend. You got plans this weekend?
My mother's coming up to visit, actually. Up from
Oh,
Idaho.
more quilting.
No, my mother's not much into the quilting. Yeah, that's Jane's turf.
Yeah, if you've got Canada Day plans involving a WestJet flight, you might want to be careful. The Mechanics Union has issued another 48-hour strike notice, coming right at the heart of Canada Day travel weekend. And these airline unions, they've got them by the short and curlies, right? Because they can't fly without them. It's not that we can bring in replacement mechanics because you kind of specialized a little bit.
Yeah, you don't want to take the guy out of Mr. Lube to pop in there and fill the role for a little while.
So they did issue a strike notice previously, and then they rescinded it because talks were going well. Now talks aren't going well, and they put it back in. So could be travel chaos on the weekend. We got a story or an update on the Liberal gun grab program. You'll remember it was brought in with much fanfare by Mr. Trudeau. Apparently, he's not doing too well, and we've got all the charts and all the guns collected, and it's quite laughable at the moment. Another laughable Trudeau project, the carbon tax. Our friend Franco at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation put out some figures today that it's going to take $12 billion out of the economy just this year. $12 billion, Cory. And we've got it broken down into how much each family will pay in each province. But of course, Trudeau says, hey, don't worry about it. It's all covered by the rebate. But, no, not really. So those are the major stuff today. We got a few things in the hopper for this afternoon to keep us busy. And and we'll keep the readers updated.
Right on. Well, I appreciate the updates and, tracking the agricultural flatus of the world. Somebody has to take that task.
Well, you live in a rural farmland, right? Rural farm area, so it's an important issue for you. I know that.
Yes. Well, with a house full of dogs, I'm very familiar with dangerous
and you've got a bulldog too, don't you?
Yes,
oh, those are the worst.
Oh, they are specialists. There's no getting around that.
Yeah. So better you than me, Cory. I love dogs, but better you than me with a bulldog.
Right on. Okay, Dave. Thanks. I'll let you get back to keeping that newsroom in line, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, we'll be on the pipeline together again tonight. Same seats exactly, with just Nigel sitting here.
Yes, that's his assigned spot.
His throne.
He would cause issues if you try.
Yeah, I wouldn't switch with him. No. He's the boss.
Right on. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Cory.
So again, that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. This is what I like to remind everybody. Get on their westernstandard.news. The reason we have all these stories, the reporters covering these things, serious stories, important stories, and fart stories, is because you guys have been subscribing. It's at $9.99 a month, $100 for a year, just like an old newspaper subscription. And that's how we stay independent. That's how we aren't beholden to the government. We can report on what's important, or at least what's funny, whatever. But you never thought twice about buying a newspaper subscription to get it delivered to your door before. This is the same sort of thing. So if you've subscribed already, thank you very much. We really do appreciate it. And if you haven't yet, come on, guys, get on board. It's well worth it, and it keeps us rolling, keeps those stories going, and allows us to, work out some of the tech issues we have, expand our infrastructure, and keep getting those reporters on the ground and with those stories out there. So typically on the show at this time, I would have a guest coming in, and we did have a few technical issues going on. Who we were going to have, and he's going to be back in a couple of weeks, thankfully. He's very patient with us, is Adam Zivo. He was a columnist, or is a columnist, with the National Post. He covers a lot of things, and I was really looking forward to talk to him. And I'm still looking forward to talking to him, of course. And one of the areas he's really been digging into is with the safer supply. I call them a cult. I call them a religion almost, because it defies reason how inflamed and crazy these people get. And he's been critical of it out in Vancouver. We're seeing that, the enablement cult, these people who feel that if we can just give enough clean, pure drugs to addicts, that everything will be okay. But it's not. It's not. If we're going to look at outcome-based policy, the outcomes are terrible. Nobody's found the solution. I'll give credit there. Premier Smith, I like to think, in Alberta, is on the right track. She's pushing for a treatment-based sort of solution. Jason Kenney started that, to give him credit. It's absolutely true. More treatment beds. I really think that's the way to go. It's slow to create them, though. It's slow to get them in fast enough. But hopefully you got a better chance. But all the same, Alberta's overdose numbers, and that's the main number to watch for this thing. The overdose numbers, the people dying from these addictions. Alberta is breaking records with them. BC is breaking records too, though. So in Alberta, we'll see. I like to think part of the reason, again, is just that we can't get those beds up fast enough. It's expensive. You need secure facilities. You need professionals. You need medical professionals. Addiction treatment is not a simple thing, but it's your best hope you got. Whereas the enablement issue, you're handing out free drugs and giving them places to go with them, that can happen fast. And they've been doing that in Vancouver and in BC for years. And what's happening there? They're having record overdoses as well. But these harm reduction activists, they've turned it into a bizarre and an absurd obsession with them. And they actually oppose anybody even trying to put out something different. Because I think the best thing we can have is a mix. I'm not wholly against safe consumption sites either. The case being made by people for those is that you can't treat an addict if they're dead, and they're right. So if you can theoretically mitigate harm long enough with an addict, that hopefully they reach the point where they're ready for treatment, ready to find, to heal themselves if they can, it's great. And if they die of an overdose early, then you've lost all that chance. So if a safe consumption center can help with that, then great, then let's look at that. But again, it's no panacea. Treatment isn't a panacea either, especially if you got to wait too long to get into it. It's a multifaceted thing. But these activists, and that's one of the things I want to talk to Adam about, and I'm going to talk to him about a couple of weeks. There were secret audio recordings obtained by the National Post of these harm reduction activists organizing a campaign to disrupt people they oppose at a conference. They're all supposedly in the business of trying to help addicts, of trying to help people get better, survive, become functional again. Yet they're competing to the point where these activists actually wanted to disrupt. They were talking about putting red dye into a water fountain at the hotel they were in. But what is with you lunatics? You know, why do you have to make everything such a hill to die on? What I want to see is outcome-based policy. That's all I want to see. If I saw any jurisdiction, and they're backing off from it everywhere with the legalization, the handouts, the enablement, the permissiveness with it. If it was successful, if we saw overdoses plummeting, if we saw addiction levels plummeting, if we saw a reduced number of people suffering out in the streets, walking around like zombies, I would be all for it. If somehow handing out clean, free drugs to people actually reduced addictions and overdoses, I would 100% support it. But it doesn't friggin' work. The evidence is as clear as day. It's not working at all. At all. There was a Kevin Dahlgren. He's an American activist, and he got some footage from within the PHS. It's called Community Services Society in Vancouver. There's some really beautiful pictures of this facility. It was supposed to be basically like a shelter, but where they'll allow drug consumption, because part of the issue with addicts, why they don't go into the shelters, why you see them in the streets, on the trains, and behind the dumpsters, is because shelters can't take them when they're wasted, or they won't take them and they won't let them consume drugs within the shelter. There's reasons for that. I mean, come on. You've got some people who truly are down on their luck, but they aren't addicts, so they got, whatever their other issues might be. And is it fair to stick them in a shelter with a guy who's on meth and completely out of control in the bed next to them? Of course not. You can't maintain safe order in a shelter when all the addicts are consuming within it. So they made, though, a shelter where the addicts could consume within it. And Dahlgren went and got footage of it later. And it's something. Look him up. Kevin Dahlgren, Dahlgren. He went in and got video footage of this. It looked like something from a movie. It was dystopian. The place was filthy. There were people passed out in little corners and cupolas, and they were, again, yes, consuming drugs. It looked like what you would envision from an old Victorian London opium den, just a horrible, horrible place. You are not saving lives this way, guys. But again, they're fighting against any critique. When you turn it into an ideology, when you turn it into a religion, you've lost reason. All I want to see is better outcomes. And nobody has come up with the best solution yet. People talk about Portugal a lot. Portugal, I think, is a neat one, but there's where, I think people who, for whatever reason, take sides on this whole thing. They look at one side or the other. And when you look at it, Portugal is a hybrid of the approaches for addiction treatment. Yes, they have decriminalized and definitely aren't out, because you aren't going to do yourself any favors by throwing addicts in jail. It doesn't do any good. They're not criminals. They're sick. They're addicts. But they're also, the other part that some enableists forget to mention, very treatment oriented. So they're not going to throw the addicts in jail, but they're going to get them into a secured treatment center as soon as possible. Treatment is the big focus. I mean, they're not just looking to permanently sustain the addiction. They want to get the person off the drugs that are harming them. And that's the hybrid that seems to be working. And you got to look at both ends of that. There was still one special I saw on TV. I still torture myself watching those things at night. And they were talking to this woman, a young lady, and she was in her 20s, and they were talking to her mother, and they were speaking on how she, in Calgary, it's important for her to be able to go to a safe consumption place so she can get on through her day. She goes in, and she was on some sort of pills, and she wants to take the pills and then go to work. And felt the message they were putting across was that she can maintain her addiction to the opiates she was taking orally, and she could just live a perfectly functional, safe, fine life, working and so on, just as long as somebody just kept an eye on her when she took her drugs every day so she doesn't overdose. That's really what it was putting across. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. And it's dangerous to put that out. There's a term with functional alcoholics. That's what I was for some years. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I haven't had a drink in years, but it took a lot of work to get to that point. The thing is, when a person's an addict, whether it's alcohol or drugs or gambling or anything, you can function for a while, but it's a decline. It's a decline. You need more and more and more of whatever your abuse or substance of choice is. And the rest of your life is going to break down around you. The worst possible delusion you could put into the mind of an addict is that they can sustain the addiction. I mean, socially, physiologically, mentally, no, the addiction will break you down and crush you. When you are addicted, I mean, that's why AA, the first step is actually kind of admitting and realizing that you are addicted, you're out of control, you have an illness that needs treatment, that needs to be worked on to break yourself free of it. And that first step is so critical. Yeah, but as you know, addicts love to delude themselves. They love to say, no, I'm okay, I'm functional, I can do this, I can maintain this, I can manage this. But they can't. And once they realize that, that's when they're on the road to recovery. So when I see irresponsible crap, like that one showing this young lady saying, oh, I just need to be able to safely consume my drugs and I'll be able to go on my life perfectly fine. No, she's on the road to dying. That's an opiate addiction she's got. She's not going to be able to maintain her job much longer. She probably doesn't have it any longer anyways, because of course the opiates don't just, you're not just feeding it to sustain the addiction, you get stoned. You're not going to be thinking straight. You're not going to be that functional. And again, it's going to harm your body. It's going to break things down. You're going to need more and more. You will lose the job. And then you will, get more desperate to find the funds to get the drugs to feed your addiction. And again, just that cycle, that dead end cycle continues. So either way, I just wanted to fill that in because we'll talk much more at length with Adam Zivo when he comes in. And what I like is columnists, some of them, and journalists that are breaking out, speaking against the mobs, having the courage to expose the problem. We went through a lot of that with the addicts and the homeless when Arthur Green was working for the Western Standard. He was fantastic in the sense that he would go around in Edmonton and take pictures to show just how bad it's getting out there. And people get upset. You're putting out, almost pornography of these poor people suffering, these people who have hit rock bottom, these people having a terrible time in their lives. But how else is the general public going to realize how bad the suffering is with these people? How else are they going to know? Because there's a lot of people who don't go downtown in their cities. They don't go into the alleys. They don't go into the transit stations to see firsthand just how bad it's getting. They can live in the suburbs. They can do their work. I'm not blaming people for not having exposed themselves to that. If you don't have to, don't do it. But we need other people out there to show this is what's going on, guys. This is how bad it's getting. And that'll get more people on board to saying, well, let's figure out a solution to this. Because one of the things that we'll see out of Premier Smith, she was talking about before, was basically compelled treatment, for addicts. Being able to take them in and say, that's it. We've got to take you in and at least try. Now, I know, people get upset on a number of levels with that. You say, well, for one, the success rate when you're compelling it is pretty low. That's true. That is true. The best scenario is for an addict to want to finally have reached a point where they want to get better, when they fully really want to get there and move forward. But you know what? With some of them, the chances, if you leave them out there, of hitting that point and seeking help are pretty much zero. Sometimes you have to intervene. There's the Mental Health Act. I talked about that with issues with my father and having to get him basically held, because he'd had a mental breakdown. And it's a long process. And there's a reason for it. Absolutely. You do not want to take away somebody's liberty lightly. I never want to take away somebody's liberty lightly. It's a very important thing to keep as many checks and balances and controls in that as you possibly can. But at some point, and every province has that sort of thing, they'll have a mental health act. If the person is going to harm themselves or others, you can intervene and stop it. And when an addict is hit that point, when they're shambling along the streets, when they're walking up and down the curbs with that sign, when they're that sick, when they're that in and out of hospitals, when they've had naloxone that many times, come on, we've got a pretty solid case that they're going to harm themselves if we've left them alone. So why can't we intervene? It's going to be interesting to see. And people say, well, it steals their dignity. There's no dignity left. When they're shambling down the street, talking to themselves, perhaps lost bowel control. I'm serious. That's how ugly it is. That's how bad it is. What dignity's left? No, we've got to intervene. That's what, I'm not a full libertarian, so people get on with that. I am a classical liberal, but I do believe there's a role for a degree of government. And I do believe it is our social obligation as humans in a civilized world to take care of those who can't take care of themselves. I think most people fall along that line. That's why universal health care is such a big principle in just about every country. We don't want to see a fellow person going bankrupt because of something that was just beyond their control. You know, if they'd gotten into an accident, or if they'd had an ailment or cancer, or who knows, they don't want to see a person losing their livelihood and everything else because of that. So they feel that we should get together, pay, so that is at least not a factor in their life. Well, likewise, people who are tied up in addiction, we should take care of them. And sometimes that means stepping in, as well with mental health. That'll be another rant for another time. All right, let's move on to some other things. Speaking of addictions, here's an addiction. We've got a lot of corporations addicted to corporate welfare. And, you know, this is something conservatives are as guilty as liberals are. They love to buy the support of companies through taking tax dollars and giving them to marginal companies, stealing the tax dollars. I'm one of those, I guess, libertarian to the point where I kind of keep referring to taxation as theft, but either way, taking the tax dollars from successful people, from successful companies, and pouring them into companies that wouldn't survive otherwise. And it rarely works. If these companies were any good, they wouldn't need the subsidy. This is just basic economics, but basic economics are lost on a lot of people. But auto executives, so this is a story that came up where they're saying that $150 billion in the nation of Canada, this small, in subsidies, aren't enough. That much above and beyond everything else for their electric vehicles. That's what it's all about, is the electric vehicles isn't enough. If it isn't enough, stop it. Stop it. It's, you know, people talk about sunk costs. So you're throwing good money after bad. If they can't make it, get out. But this electric vehicle madness, and it's madness. Some of the regulations where they're talking about when we're going to have to force, you know, dealers to sell electric vehicles, force manufacturers to only make electric vehicles, yet we don't have the infrastructure for it. We don't have the money for it. Yet we're pushing along with this. And now, this is a neat one. This is a neat one where the Trudeau regime has gotten themselves into a corner on this because they're so fixated on this. You know, he's been tossing $50 billion here, $50 billion there. Remember, that's $50,000 million at battery manufacturing plants for electric vehicles. And now they're talking about possibly banning or putting tariffs or taxing Chinese electric vehicles, because the Chinese are manufacturing them, and they're manufacturing them more inexpensively than we do over here in North America for a number of reasons. I mean, yes, they have virtual slave labor. They don't worry about environmental regulations. There's a lot of reasons China can get a lot of things done more inexpensively than we can, and the quality could be lower. But they want to export, you know, kind of, if you go to a dollar store, everything in there is typically from China. They want to bring the EVs here. In fact, I think Tesla is even getting some of theirs manufactured over there. So what Trudeau's worried about now is if China dumps all of their, and it's dumping, so if they're selling them here just to pierce into the market at less than the cost of making them or near the cost, it's really going to disrupt the market, but it will allow them to corner it. But if the federal government bans that or puts a huge tariff on it, okay, that'll work. Kind of. But the problem is it puts the cost of every electric vehicle up because, you know, you've taken away the competition. And when you take away the competition, the consumer loses. So he's in a rock and a hard place. Is your goal to get everybody in an electric vehicle or not? Because if the goal really is to save the world, if that's the way we're going to stop climate change, apparently, if that's the way we're going to end weather events and, you know, all the good stuff that they keep coming up with, then you should be welcoming these cheap Chinese electric vehicles into Canada as heavily and as quickly as possible if that's all that matters. But instead, you're going to raise the taxes on these so they don't come in. Then you're going to take the tax money out of other people, give them to electric vehicle manufacturers here that are going to be making subsidized electric vehicles that they're going to sell to you at a higher price because the Chinese competitors aren't coming in, which means the development of electric vehicles is going to go even slower. It's insane. But again, it kind of gets back to my opening monologue. You know, this government is not competent. They aren't sane. And this whole electric vehicle thing, I mean, Trudeau's been looking for a legacy. That's a little bit, I think, of why he's still hanging in there. He's still standing there. Because if he resigned tomorrow, most prime ministers want to look back and say, this is what I accomplished while I was in. You know, this is what I got done. Excuse me, Mulroney got free trade, you know, and Trudeau Senior got the charter. But what did Justin get in? What does he manage to do? He legalized pot. Actually, it was a good move, but I don't know if that's the big groundbreaking, massive policy initiative that one wants to sit on. So he wanted to save the world. He wanted Canada to be the international Boy Scout. He wanted us to be the ones that were going to be, ending global warming through leading by example. And of course, it's just turned into a disaster because his government's incompetent and can't do things through reasonable policies. They just do it through throwing our money at them. But the electric vehicles, they've turned that into their panacea. That's their holy grail. If everybody could just get out of combustion engines, somehow the climate would stabilize and everything be happy, and the little bunnies and the birds would all be hopping and flying around and everything be great. But it's just not working. It's all falling apart like everything else that clown does. The sooner we get out of it, the better. But right now, the auto manufacturers, it shows, they get their hands out. Give me more, give me more, give me more. We need more. It's not working. We got 150 billion already. Oh, we want more. No. You know what? No. Stop it. Stop it. It's good money after bad. Same sort of thing when we're looking at legacy media. I've been kind of beating on them online a little bit with Chorus. If you look at their stock, they own Global. And there's some other stuff happened. They used to own a bunch of profitable, I guess, television stations, cable channels, the Home and Garden Network, and a few others. And I guess those all got pieced out. And all they're kind of left with is Global News and some radio stations and some other things that are losing money, deep in the red. And they might get bailed out yet again. But you see, the problem is with these companies, when they get bailed out, then they don't adapt. They don't reform themselves. I did an interview on a station out by Toronto and Mississauga the other day, a radio interview. And these guys are neat because they've slimmed down their station, because radio's, it doesn't draw the viewers anymore like it used to, or listeners, I should say. It doesn't have the ad revenue that it used to. So they have to change to stay there. There's still a lot of people will listen to talk format radio, but there's fewer of them. And you have to bring down your costs in order to service that. These guys have done it great. The producer who books me for the show, I can hear his voice, when I'm on break, and he's doing the traffic report later. And speaking of the traffic reports, like Calgary, one of the Chorus radio stations, the talk radio stations, they got a traffic helicopter. Well, think about that. How much is that costing to put a traffic helicopter into the sky with staff every morning and afternoon? Helicopters are expensive, very, very expensive. And guess what? With your phone, you can find out where the traffic jams are in short order. And if you're listening to the radio station could have somebody look on their phone with Google Maps and tell you where the traffic jams are. You don't need to be spending what must be hundreds of thousands a year on a traffic helicopter. But you see, these big dinosaur legacy media outlets can't flex. They can't change. They don't know how to make themselves better. And when they rely on subsidies, they aren't inspired to make themselves better. So if Global gets bailed out, they won't get any better. You're keeping a zombie on life support. That's all you're doing. It's going to die eventually, but you're wasting money and time on it. Likewise with these electric vehicles. Maybe the time will come. Maybe it will. Maybe there'll be enough advancements, breakthroughs. I will buy electric if and when it gets good enough to suit me. I just don't want the government telling me when I got to buy it. I got a lawnmower that's getting on its last legs. I've been looking at the electric versions, the ones where you charge, not the old ones with the cable where you used to run over your extension cord all the time with the lawnmower, but the ones where you charge and the batteries are getting fantastic and they're getting cost effective. I'm probably going to move to that when I get my next mower. I'm hoping I'm a cheap guy. I'm hoping I can squeak another year or two out of this gas one I've had for a long, long time. But when it goes, I'm going to go electric. But you see, it's because I chose to, because the mowers got good enough to make me want to go that route. If a car gets to a point, or a truck, where it really will hold a charge that long, where the cost is really that appealing for the vehicle itself, where they'll last long enough, where they'll perform well enough, if they're better than combustion engines on all those fronts, I'll probably move. But not until then. I don't want a government gun to my head telling me I have to move to these cars. That's not the way to do it. So give it time. Leave the private market alone. They will come up with better electric technology to make it better. Right now, what we're doing is subsidizing junk. And you got to think, when that money's being poured into these plants in Ontario and Quebec, chances are they're going to build technology that'll be, when you're getting into stuff like this, it goes obsolete fast. So they'll probably get their plants up and running, and some private plant somewhere else will have already come up with a better technology, and the stuff that this being manufactured in Canada, so mark my words on this one, will be determined to be obsolete and junk, and we'll just put billions of dollars into nothing. Subsidies don't work, guys. Let's see, NDP MP who builds, this is beautiful, Nikki Ashton, she's an MP for the NDP. She billed us $17,000 to go home for Christmas. Isn't that cool? How? What did you blow it on? She lives in northern Manitoba. These MPs get a generous travel allowance. Now, I don't begrudge them that. The ones who, you live in Calgary, you live in Vancouver, you've got to spend a certain degree of time in Ottawa, you got to come back and forth. Yeah, it's fair for them to be paid for housing while they're in Ottawa and for the travel back and forth and some degree of travel to conferences and things, but it gets ridiculous. You're going home for Christmas? $17,000? Come on. Oh, but she's realized she made a mistake. She's paying $2,900 of it back. No, it's fraud. She should be paying every bloody penny back. If this was in the private market, you'd be charged. You'd be fired, and you'd probably be charged for fraud. And she said the costs were necessary to meet with stakeholders and deal with an urgent bedbug situation. This is how bizarre some of these entitled politicians get. Deal with a bedbug situation? Now, thankfully, I've never had a bedbug outbreak in my home. But if I did, I'd be calling the Orkin man, not my member of parliament. What the hell is she? A bedbug situation is what the MP is supposed to be dealing with? Where do they get this stuff? I mean, I know it ties into something more. It's a northern Manitoba riding. It's an indigenous area. There are some very serious social issues. There are some very serious hygienic issues in these socially challenged areas. And bed bugs are gross and nasty. And I guess there's an outbreak in the reserve. It doesn't mean, though, that you can somehow justify your Christmas tab for going home for a visit because your neighbors had bed bugs. But she thinks it covers that. When the time comes that we fire all the Liberals, let's make sure we fire the NDP as well. Let's see, firearms, here's another beauty. As the Western Standard headline said on it, it's shooting blanks, the government policy. The ones that, it's been 4 years since the government banned a whole whack of different types of firearms in Canada. So far, they've brought in 2,123 of these new blacklisted firearms. 723 of those were surrendered by owners. So, a third, basically. But the other 2/3, they were seized because for other police investigations, things they weren't being used legally. The reality then, you see, again, I mentioned that in a past show, Canada is the 7th most armed civilian population on Earth. We have millions and millions of firearms in Canada. And thankfully, we don't actually, on a relative scale, have a lot of firearm-related crimes. We're doing pretty good. We're doing all right. But this attempt by the government to take them is not working. People don't trust the government. They're not giving them their firearms, and we're not becoming any safer. But yet again, we're spending a whole lot of money on things that we don't need to. Let's see. Let's look a little further. Black market dairy. I saw another, speaking of the libertarian end of things, this isn't an ongoing thing. There's some people, I guess the CBC did a big expose or, investigative report on a guy who's selling black market raw milk in Calgary somewhere. And, there's a lot of people really hung up on the raw milk thing. Like, pasteurized bad, whatever. I believe pasteurization's good. I'd rather have pasteurized products. It makes me feel better. I think it's a good development. But I don't think it should be illegal for people to get non-pasteurized stuff. Who cares? I don't care. Suck it right out of the cow itself, if that's your thing. Doesn't matter to me. Just leave it a choice. Just label it, pasteurized, unpasteurized. But this battle, back alley milk. Come on, guys. It kind of shows, though, when government regulates things, anything can become a smuggled commodity, and unpasteurized milk is one gray market commodity going on in the world. Let's see, getting back to bad management, the battle is going on between Premier Daniel Smith and Justin Trudeau. Excuse me. One of the deals Justin cut, of course, with Jagmeet Singh to try and maintain the government and stay in power and so on, was the dental plan, which has turned into yet another joke. I mean, we're talking in every province, the number of dentists actually opting into that dental plan is in the hundreds. So yeah, sure, you get this dental coverage, but you can't find a dentist to actually do the work. And Smith has just basically said outright, we're opting out. Alberta's out. We don't want any part of it. And it's provincial jurisdiction. So there's another battle that's going to come up. It'll be interesting. And we don't need Trudeau taking care of our teeth. He should be trying to take care of his own ass right now, and he's not doing a very good job of it. Locally, Calgary, yes, they're still under water restrictions. You're still supposed to let it mellow if it is yellow, and if it's brown, flush it down, sort of thing. Car washes are shut down. Businesses are harmed. They really think they're going to have it open by the Stampede. We'll see what happens. It has led to, though, Jody Gondek in emergencies, usually a leader will kind of surf a bit of a wave of support. People rally around. Not in the case of Gondek. She actually lost 4 points of support since this thing began. It's just a disaster all around. People are sick of her. They're sick of this mess, even if she directly wasn't responsible for it. She's not endearing herself with Calgarians any further with her communications on it. Meanwhile, going further with infrastructure, if we're talking about billions of dollars, the Green Line is a Calgary project. It was a LRT expansion that just keeps getting smaller and smaller while the price just gets bigger and bigger, and they haven't even laid a mile of track yet. There's supposed to be a report in June on the progress of that, and everybody's been kind of anticipating it's going to be a pretty bad disaster. But June's almost over, and I haven't heard that report. I think city administration is kind of hiding that disaster right now because they're already up the creek with, sort of screwing up on that vital service of delivering water to Calgarians. It's going to be hard to sell Calgarians on spending an extra $5 billion on top of the other $5 billion to try and get this train line to nowhere done when they can't even get clean drinking water or flush the pee down their toilets. This city council is just, and I mean, city councils across Canada are a mess. But Calgary's getting to be in a special sort of place. Jyoti Gondek, in a recent poll, found 7% of people strongly support her now. 7%. That's how bad it is. She might resign before Trudeau does. We'll see. She doesn't seem to like the job very much. All right. Well, that's enough rambling out of me for this week, guys. Lots to cover, lots going on. Enjoy this summer. Get out. It's been beautiful out here in the West. I'm sure it is in other areas. Watch the news, but don't let it dominate your life, guys. There's many things to be positive about, even though I'm constantly cranky and negative when I'm on here. That's what I'm all about. So thank you all for tuning in this week, guys. And I will see you all again next week at this time. I will have a guest, and damn it, we'll have our tech issues sorted out, and we'll have a great conversation. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week.